Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys for joining me here on a Saturday. Tonight it is Packers versus Ravens, and if the Packers can beat Baltimore this evening, the Pittsburgh Steelers will win their first division championship in a half decade. So we're going to be going live tonight here on Steelers Talk. We're going to be breaking down the entire game live on the show. We're going to be going live about 30 minutes before kickoff, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Me and Ponzi will have Super Chat giveaways, just like a normal watch party, post-game reaction, all that great stuff. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button, and if the Packers win tonight, we'll have a little bit of a celebration to celebrate our first AFC North Division Championship since 2020. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Join us later in today's show. But I wanted to get in front of a camera here, the early portion of the day here, before we go live, before I head into the studio later this evening. Talk about some Steelers updates here for Week 17 before they play the Cleveland Browns tomorrow. All right, so this team announced today that Jalen Ramsey is good to go. He's been dealing with an illness, and he was listed as questionable on yesterday's injury report. They took him off of the injury report today. He is good to go to start in the slot and be the Steelers' starting nickel tomorrow on defense. And then Isaac Seumalo, who was listed as questionable with his triceps injury on yesterday's injury report, has officially been downgraded to out for tomorrow's game. Spencer Anderson is expected to get his second start at left guard. And obviously, getting Ramsey into the mix tomorrow on defense is a big deal. If the Steelers need to win tomorrow's game to clinch the division, having Ramsey out there instead of like Deshaun Jameson or Daryl Porter Jr. or Trey Flowers, who the team just signed this week, obviously that's a big step up for the Steelers defense, and gives them one less weakness to worry about on the defensive side of the ball tomorrow against Shedeur Sanders and what I expect to be a very pass-heavy Cleveland Browns offense tomorrow afternoon. But then with Seumalo being out and Spencer Anderson expected to get his second start in a row at left guard, obviously that's a downgrade, but I think it's probably the smart move. This isn't the first time Seumalo's dealt with a triceps injury. And I think it's important that similar to other injured players on the Steelers roster, like T.J. Watt, you want to make sure that those players are good to go for when and if the Pittsburgh Steelers make the NFL postseason this year, because you got to have those guys healthy and ready to go. I think the Steelers still have a pretty darn good chance of winning tomorrow, especially if they play all of their starters. If they need to win tomorrow against Cleveland, even without Seumalo out on the field. I think Spencer Anderson and Andrew Speed have done a perfectly fine job at that left guard spot when Seumalo has been out. But certainly Isaac's played really good football this year, and when he gets back, he obviously is an upgrade for this offensive line, and you want that upgrade available to you when you make the playoffs. So those are the injury updates that we got for you guys today. But now I want to kind of shift my focus here to the possibility of the Green Bay Packers winning tonight and the Steelers having the division locked up before they even take a snap tomorrow afternoon. And, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, if the Packers win tonight, sit Aaron Rodgers, don't play certain starters, and, specifically play Will Howard, the rookie quarterback out of Ohio State, over Mason Rudolph if you're going to be putting in a backup quarterback to rest Aaron Rodgers. And I'm just here to say that I don't think the Steelers are going to do that. And honestly, I'm not sure if they should. Now, I think that if you have the division locked up heading into next week, you absolutely should start Will Howard, and you should give him that game as an opportunity against a division rival in a cold AFC North type environment with a legitimate defense. I mean, the Baltimore defense is a legit unit. I would give him the full week, or pretty much the full week of first team practice reps. Allow Rodgers to heal up that wrist for a full week before the postseason, and give Will Howard a chance to see what he can do in a full game against a division rival in Pittsburgh in front of the Steelers' fans to see if he can handle it. Now, I'm usually not somebody that is a huge proponent of starting rookie quarterbacks in their first year, just because the game is completely different going from college to pro, and especially for a guy like Will Howard that's missed so much time and development time in camp this year in particular. And then by the time he's been able to get back, he's in a position where he's not getting a ton of reps. There's definitely a question as to just how ready he would be for that kind of moment. But for a guy like Will Howard, who is a sixth-round pick, opportunities to play are going to be pretty scarce before Aaron Rodgers moves on, and the Steelers will have to make a decision as to whether or not to give Will Howard a chance to be this team's starting quarterback. And this might be the only opportunity the Steelers really have to give Will Howard a chance to show what he can do before making a decision as to what they want to do at the quarterback position long term. Because there's a very real possibility that Rodgers either retires this year or he comes back for one more season and then plays a whole nother season, and we don't get a chance to see Will Howard. We're left at a point here where if he doesn't play at some point during the regular season this year, we're just not going to have any evidence to look at Will Howard and say, yeah, we can trust him to be a part of a competition to be the starting quarterback down the line. But if he plays and he plays well against Baltimore in Week 18, I think that could be a sign that Will could get a chance to be the starting quarterback of this football team at some point. So the reason why I don't think he's going to play tomorrow is because he hasn't gotten any reps this week. And, if he's somebody that's, on scout team, not really taking a lot of reps with the ones, all these different things, and then all of a sudden Green Bay wins tonight, and then Mike Tomlin goes up to him and says, okay, kid, you've gotten 0 reps with the starters this week. You are going to be the starting quarterback tomorrow. I think that puts Will in a pretty unfair situation, and I think Mike Tomlin probably would know that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't, rest Rodgers. Maybe you let Rodgers play like a quarter or something just to get, a couple reps in, get into a little bit of a rhythm, and then, go to Mason Rudolph, who is the team's backup quarterback. I would say if they do decide to bench Rodgers for this week's game against Cleveland, Mason, who is the guy that's asked to come cold off the bench anyways in the event of an Aaron Rodgers injury, should probably come in and he should finish the game. And then when you get to Week 18, you allow Will Howard to get those reps with the ones, be a part of the game plan, specifically tailor the game plan to his strengths, and then let him go do his thing in the season finale. Because plain simply, if the Steelers have the division locked up, I think it's probably best for Aaron Rodgers to spend a week healing up that wrist, getting his legs ready, making sure that he's got the stamina to hopefully go on a run here in the playoffs of 4 games. That's what we would need in order to win a Super Bowl here in Pittsburgh, and that absolutely is the goal here in the Steel City. So that's probably the way that I would handle it. I don't think it's fair to throw Will out there for the Cleveland game. I think if you're going to bench Aaron Rodgers this week, which I'm perfectly down for if the Steelers have the division locked up tonight, I would probably play Mason Rudolph this week and then transition to Will Howard for the season finale. And then, of course, back to Rodgers for the playoff game at Acrisure Stadium. Now, there's certainly an argument to be made that maybe Rodgers should just keep playing even if the division is locked up, just to continue to build that chemistry and, not get cold, so to speak, before the postseason. Because if he sits 1 or 2 weeks, here before the postseason, and then we get to the playoffs and then Rodgers, is not playing his best football, the narrative is going to be, well, you should have played him in the final 2 weeks so he wouldn't lose his rhythm. And there would be certainly a decent case that would be the case. So, it's definitely a difficult decision because on the one hand, Rodgers is playing really well right now. You don't want him to necessarily get cold or lose that, consistency or lose that rhythm. But on the other hand, if you play Rodgers in games that don't matter and then he gets injured again, that's going to be equally just as bad. So it's really a tough decision from Mike Tomlin, in my opinion. But my guess is Rodgers will not play the entirety of tomorrow's football game against the Browns. We might not even play at all if the Green Bay Packers win tonight and the Baltimore Ravens are eliminated from playoff contention. Now, I'll finish up today's show here with a little bit of a preview of tonight's matchup against Green Bay and Baltimore. If you haven't been keeping up on our at-home videos throughout the week here, just so you guys know, Lamar Jackson, doubtful to play tonight with a back contusion. And then Jordan Love, the Packers starting quarterback, is officially out for tonight's game. So we are expecting a Tyler Huntley versus Malik Willis matchup in Green Bay at Lambeau Field this evening. And frankly, guys, I think Malik Willis is still the best quarterback on the field I don't think Malik is quite as good as Jordan Love, so it's a downgrade, and it does give the Ravens a little bit of a better chance to win. But Malik has certainly shown that he can play some decent football in the limited sample size that he's had as the starting quarterback of the Packers. He played pretty decently last week, had a couple really nice throws down the field against Chicago. In my opinion, the loss to the Bears last week was definitely not on him or the way that he played. Obviously, he's a dynamic rusher of the football, and they do have some pretty good weapons and a good offensive play caller there in Matt LaFleur for the Packers. So not to mention they got Josh Jacobs, who's an excellent rusher of the football. So I think the Packers are probably still favorited to win tonight. Not only do they have all those things I just mentioned, but they do have the home field advantage. The Ravens, obviously have lost 2 of their last 3. They lost a really demoralizing one last week. Obviously, they're fighting for their playoff lives, so, we'll see how much fight that Ravens team has without their starting quarterback this evening. But I still think going into tonight that the more than likely scenario here is that the Pittsburgh Steelers will have the division locked up by the time we go to bed this evening. Now, if that's not the case, I still think the Steelers are the pretty heavy favorites to win tomorrow in Cleveland and still lock up the division, and Baltimore will officially be eliminated by the end of the week. But it would be really nice, and it would really take some stress off of us tomorrow on the Steelers Talk Watch Party if the Packers can come out with the win. And if that happens, I just want to finish up today's show here, guys, by kind of reflecting on what a division championship would mean here in Pittsburgh, because obviously this team hasn't won a division championship since 2020. That's a half decade now, and this is a team here in the Pittsburgh Steelers where we're expecting to be at the top of the division. We're expecting to be in not only playoff contention but Super Bowl contention. There's a reason why this fan base has grown pretty frustrated with Mike Tomlin, is because even though he's getting this team to playoffs and even elevating probably non-playoff caliber teams to the postseason, he hasn't been building Super Bowl level teams in the past. Now I think that this team gives this franchise the best chance at playoff success in quite a long time, probably since the end of the Killer B era. And I think with Rodgers' experience in the postseason, especially in a wide open AFC where there's a lot of inexperienced playoff quarterbacks in the AFC playoff field this year, it feels like this year's Steelers team has the best possible chance to have success in the playoffs and maybe even go on a deep playoff run in quite a while. And it definitely feels like if the Steelers are going to go on a run, this is probably the year to do it, because there's not going to be any Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. If the Steelers make the playoffs this year, that means there will be no Baltimore Ravens either. There's a lot of teams that are seen as powerhouses in the AFC with elite quarterbacks that will not be in the postseason. So that opens the opportunity for the Pittsburgh Steelers to at least get one playoff win, because they will get a home playoff game if they win the division. But with the Steelers not winning a division championship in a little while here, I just want to kind of reflect on and kind of bring light to the fact that a division championship is not nothing. And I understand that the AFC North has not been the best division in football this year. It's been one of the worst divisions in football this year. But listen, man, a division championship's a division championship, and that's a hat and a T-shirt. That's a banner. And I know that here in Pittsburgh, we worry about more than just division championships, but it's important to take your wins when you get them, appreciate those wins, and it is a division championship, which does mean something. When people say, oh, the Pittsburgh Steelers haven't really won anything in a while, it's like, yeah, that's true, because they've made the playoffs as a wild card, but they haven't been able to win in the postseason, and they haven't been able to win division championships. And this is the first step to getting to that playoff success, is winning your division, being the best team in your division, getting that home playoff game. And even if the Steelers don't win a playoff game this year, obviously that would be massively disappointing, especially if you lose at home in the first round of the playoffs. But if the Steelers win this division, that means that they win something of importance this season at the very least. Now, hopefully they can do more than that. You don't want to just stop at a division championship, especially when it's arguably the weakest division in the entire National Football League. And we definitely want that playoff win, at least one of them here in Pittsburgh this year. And it would be great to, put yourself in contention for a NFL championship, not just an AFC North championship, but, there's only one team at the end of this thing that's going to be walking away Super Bowl champions. I think it's important to be able to take your wins when you get them, appreciate those, and that's certainly what we're going to be doing tonight if the Steelers clinch the AFC North Division Championship with a Baltimore Ravens loss. So make sure you guys join us later tonight. We're going to be going live in studio at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have a 30-minute pregame show, followed by live play-by-play and analysis of Ravens versus Packers, and then we'll put out a post-game video either celebrating a division championship for Pittsburgh or talking about the stakes of tomorrow's game versus the Cleveland Browns. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's going to be a great weekend of live coverage here on Steelers Talk. I hope you guys will join us. Until later tonight, guys, here we go, Steelers.